Hey everyone, Clay from clayviation.com. We've just taken off from Smyrna Airport just outside of Nashville, Tennessee for part 3 of our cross-country flight down to Shelbyville, where we hear there's some good barbecue. So we've used that as a good excuse to go fly today. As we climb out here, the first thing we're going to do to get en route is to go ahead and turn towards the south, which is our heading down to Shelbyville. So we're looking down here for our heading indicator. 150 degrees is where we are, and we'll keep the turn coming on around until we are at 180 degrees. Okay, ease on around. All right, once we level out here, as we keep our climb going, we'll get a quick climb check. Climb checklist, throttle full, mixture is required, and flaps are up. Okay. So we're shooting for we're right now at about 2,300 feet on our altimeter, and we're shooting for about 3,500 feet. We're going to go ahead and tune in the Shelbyville VOR, which is 109.6 on our nav 1 over here. Flip that to active, and let's listen to that to identify the Morse code. Okay, that Morse code we're hearing matches Shelbyville. Dit 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 da dit da da dit dit dit. So we're in good shape there, tuned and identified. Let's keep our climb going. We're at 3,000 feet for 3,500. And now that we've got that identified, we're going to go ahead and start spinning this around here in our OBS selector, which is just here, and work on getting that needle centered to navigate in on. We're going to go ahead and level off here. Got about 100 feet to go. Change our view here so we can see ourselves a little better. Okay, so we're going to level off here, and as we pick up speed, we'll adjust our trim wheel just a bit. I've got my settings on my yoke itself, and we're going to get nice and stabilized. I'm going to pull the power out to our cruise setting, about 2,300 RPM, as we work to maintain our altitude and our heading. And I'm adjusting my trim wheel so that I don't have to push the nose over or pull the nose up, and the airplane will ideally fly without much pressure. So we'll keep adjusting that little by little. We'll go ahead and do a cruise check. Power set, mixture. We're not going to lean the mixture today. We're at 3,500. Above 3,000, we usually lean it out, but we're going to take a very short hop here, so we're not going to lean that mixture today. And the landing light off. So let's go ahead and pop that landing light to off here. Okay. So as we're cruising here, let's go ahead and line up our OBS, and it shows that we're about on the 175, navigating towards the 175 radial of the Shelbyville VOR. Let's not lose altitude here. So we're going to try to keep that needle centered at this point. And if the needle starts to drift left, we fly left. If it drifts right, we fly right. Simple as that. Now, if we look off our left wing here, we should see Murfreesboro, which is the town there. And that's one little bit of pilotage that we can use. On our sectional chart, we see Murfreesboro off our left. And when we look out, we see Murfreesboro off our left, which is good news. You can see that needle drifting just the slightest bit to the left. So we'll adjust our heading just the slightest bit to the left. If we follow this needle in, that's eventually going to take us to Shelbyville, where we're looking to go. Now we're only going 25 miles or so to Shelbyville, so we don't have very long in the air. One thing to do, if I know that once we've got Murfreesboro off to our left, which we do now, or as we're approaching, I know that there's a little private airport down below us. So Flight Simulator is hard just to look out the window and kind of dip down. But one thing you can do is actually go back to the outside here and kind of take a top-down view, and look at that. There's a little private airport right down below us, just as it is on the map. I think that's called McDonald. So again, a little pilotage to help us get our situational awareness bearings going. Go back in the cockpit, make sure we're looking good. See, we're drifting. We got the needle drifting a little bit, so let's go ahead and just correct. Fly just a few degrees to the left and let that come back in centered here on this needle here. All right, our altitude looks good. We're level. We've got about 175 on the heading indicator. That matches our compass just up top. And our speed's about 120 knots. We're cruising nicely. Let's go ahead and correct for this drift a little bit more. We keep wanting to kind of drift off to the right. So at this point, we've still got a few minutes to go before we need to start a descent. Like I said, this is a short hop. We're not going all that far, but what we can do is we can go ahead and plug in the Shelbyville weather into our comm, which is 119.275. So let's go ahead and plug that in here. 119.275. Let's go ahead and listen to that weather there.
Bomer FLD Shelbyville Muni Information Foxtrot. 1300 Zulu weather. Sky clear, visibility 23. Temperature 13.0. Wind calm, altimeter 2992. Arriving and departing runway 18. Advise on initial contact, you have Foxtrot.
Okay, and we know that this is an uncontrolled field, or a pilot-controlled field, so we're not actually going to call a tower, we're actually going to call their CTAF, or their Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. I'm just moving this little compass out of the way here because I'm trying to see up ahead of us and get a visual of Shelbyville whenever we can. Well, let's go ahead and plug in that CTAF so we've got it ready. 122.8 is that frequency. So we'll go up to 122.8. Let's go ahead and flip that in the active. We've listened to our weather. We know what that's looking like. Runway 18 is the arriving and departing runway. And that's normally based on the winds. That's a little more information than an airport like Shelbyville would likely have, but gives us what we need. We're probably going to make just a long straight-in approach today instead of flying a normal traffic pattern. We'll cover traffic patterns in a future video, but for the purposes of today, I think a long straight-in should be appropriate. You can see now our needle is drifting just a little bit right, so we're going to adjust our heading just a little bit to the right. Get that back in line. Now the tough thing about this sort of navigation is without any kind of landmarks below us, we don't know exactly how far out we are, so we're really looking for the airport to get in sight is really what is going to tell us where we are. We don't have any information like a GPS that says, hey, you're this many miles out. So that can be a little bit challenging. That's the joy and the beauty of flying. So let's go ahead and get our needle to come back in a little bit and correct that drift. Now, if you look right out here, you can see these lights right here, and that is Shelbyville Airport. So that's where we're heading to. So this far out, we've got the field in sight, which is really nice. Once we feel we're about 5 miles out or so, we'll go ahead and call the traffic and let them know where we are and what our intentions are. And for now, we'll just kind of enjoy the scenery. Looks like we've got another little private airstrip over there to our right. We can look at our map and gain some situational awareness. If you look down, you've got some private airstrips down there, so we kind of know the region that we're getting into. We can see now off of our left shoulder, Murfreesboro kind of fading in the distance. Looking back to our flight instruments, you can see we need to correct our course to the right to get back on this VOR radial that we originally set. Now we could theoretically spin this VOR radial and center it back up again, or the OBS rather, center it back up, which puts us on a new radial we're tracking about a little over 175 again. So, but we see Shelbyville in the distance, so at this point it's just a matter of planning when we're going to start to descend and land. If we switch to our 3D cockpit mode, it actually gives us the ability to kind of zoom and pan around a little bit, which is kind of nice for sightseeing. And as we talked in previous video, it's actually nice to be able to get a little bit of a close-up on some of the instruments too, if you wanted to kind of go down here and take a look at some of these, plug the radio in, get a closer view. Let's go back to our regular view here. The field elevation of Shelbyville is 801 feet, and so we're going to fly, we're going to want the traffic pattern altitude that we would enter our traffic pattern there is 1,800 feet. It's 1,000 above our field elevation. So right now we're at 3,000 feet, and we're looking to get down to 1,800 feet. However, we're going to do a long straight-in approach. So we're going to start our descent here shortly so that we can start going ahead and getting down. Now the white lights that we see are actually a device that will help us land. There's 4 lights over there, and that is called a Precision Approach Path Indicator, a PAPI. And those 4 white lights are telling us that we are high on the glide path. So the sloped angle that would take us right down into the runway, that we're high on that glide path. Ideally, we're looking for 2 red and 2 white. As we descend, one of those lights would turn red. As we get further down, another one. As we get low, another one. And as we're super low, all 4 are red. So 2 white and 2 red mean we're right on the glide path. We'll go ahead and start our descent. At this point, we're probably about maybe 4 or 5 miles out. So we make a radio call that sounds something like Shelbyville traffic, Cessna 172, Sierra Papa, 5 miles to the north inbound for landing, runway 18, Shelbyville. So we'll go ahead and for our descent checklist, fuel selector we'll set to both, which is already on both. Power as desired. Let's go ahead and pull our power back. We're going to do a little cruise descent here, about 2,000 RPMs. One might be coming in a little bit high, that's okay. We can correct as we get down. Over here on our vertical speed, we're looking for about a 500 feet per minute descent rate, which is a nice comfortable descent rate. And now that we have power out, we can adjust our trim as well if you have those controls, and that will help you not have to pull so much on that yoke, and it will more or less fly this path on its own. Next is our mixture, which we will make sure is rich. Our lights on, which will turn our landing light back on so any aircraft can see us, and our avionics and flight instruments are set, which we have our CTAF in. Is really all we need for right now. So we'll continue our approach, flying at about 100 knots right now, and coming down nicely. At this point, there's a check we can do that's called the GUMPS check, G-U-M-P-S, and that's a little handy reminder that can be used in just about any aircraft. And some of the things don't apply to our aircraft, but it's still a good habit to get into. So for GUMPS, we do G, which is gas. We make sure that we have fuel coming in, fuel tank on both. U is for undercarriage, which is just simply our gear here. We make sure our gear is down and locked. So obviously we have gear that stays down, but it's still fun to look out the window and say down and locked, so that when we get to retractable gear airplanes, we're in good shape. I'm going to go ahead and pull this power out a little bit more, and I'm going to make my descent rate just a little more than I have. I'm actually going to go ahead and slow the airplane down just a bit. I'm going to pull the nose up just a little bit here, and that's going to slow us down. Watch our airspeed over here as we pull the nose up. At first our descent rate kind of slows, but then as we get slower and we get into this white arc here, once I get to that white arc, and that's our flaps operating range, once I'm into that, I can go ahead and throw a notch of flaps in. It's going to want a balloon, so I'm going to push over a little bit to compensate for that. Okay. So we're flying about 75 here. To continue on that guns check, we've got gas, undercarriage, mixture, which we make sure is rich down here. Propellers, which we don't have a propeller knob on this airplane. If we did, we'd make sure the propellers are forward. And then seatbelts and switches. So we make sure our seatbelts are on and our switches and our lights are as we want it. So I don't know what I just did. I apparently turned on some sort of vectors. Wow, look at that. It's like a laser show. Okay, let's go ahead and put another notch of flaps in as we're kind of high. Let's see if we can get down to this glide slope. I want to show you how these lights go from from white to red as we get down a little bit lower. So we're flying about 70 now, which is nice. We want to fly our final approach at about 65. I'm just kind of adjusting my trim constantly as we do this. And at this point, if we're continuing to pitch for our airspeed of 65, if I pull our power out a little bit, we're going to start a little bit greater descent. So you can see this needle sink a little bit if I pull the power out. So came in a little bit high, so you can watch these lights go from white to red. And then once we start to get back on path again, let's go ahead and put this last notch of flaps in. and kind of head down to our final approach speed of 65 here. We should see these lights coming on in. You should see that far right-hand light turning to red here momentarily. That'll tell us that we're going from high to closer to glide path. We are pretty high on this approach. That's part of the reason that a traffic pattern is nice, because you get a nice starting point every time and you don't have to judge how far out you are. At this point, we'd make sure we'd have our call. Shelbyville traffic, Cessna 172, Sierra Popper on short final, runway 18, Shelbyville. We might not see these lights come on in, maybe to the last moment. I've got my power all the way out here. I've got my flaps all the way in. Our airspeed's looking really good. Looks like we've got a high approach the whole time. We might not see those lights come in, so got a lot of runway to work with. Just going to transition here as we get above the runway environment. A little bit of right rudder, stay above this center line. We're going to transition to a level flight attitude and hold it off. And there we are. I'm going to go outside the airplane now so I can see a little bit better for taxi, as we talked about in our last session. Actually going to just kind of power up a little bit so we can make it up to this taxiway here and turn off. There's a little bit of braking. We always want to brake straight ahead. And then we'll make the turn here. Off of the runway. Now we're clear of the runway, so we're actually going to stop here for a moment. Let's go back in the cockpit. We're going to do our after landing check quickly here. Let me set my throttle to 1,000. So turn to this here. After landing, wing flaps retract, so we're going to pull those wing flaps up. See those coming up right here. Lights as required. We can actually turn our landing light off at this point. Our mixture as required, which we're not going to lean on the ground at this airport. Elevator trim we'll set back to takeoff. And transponder to standby, which we would just switch over here back to standby. Okay, so let's go ahead. We'll have made an announcement that says Shelbyville traffic, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa, clear the active Shelbyville. And we'll go ahead and throttle up now. Head on over to our FBO, our fixed base operator, where we will pick up a courtesy car and head into a little barbecue joint that I've been reading about online. As I mentioned in the last video, the scenery on this version of X-Plane, they have improved it dramatically in some of the newer versions, which I hope to show you one of these days. The scenery in this is not so great for the airports, so if I remember this airport correctly, we're actually going to be parking just kind of near some trees in an open area, so you'll have to use your imagination a little bit on the FBO. But we're going to head over and we will shut down the aircraft and secure it. We're going to taxi off to the left here. Yeah, we've got some trees growing right in the middle of the tie downs here. Doesn't look like they have much fuel service here. Not even a Coke machine or a restaurant. We'll have to call for an Uber. They'll come pick us up. So we're going to taxi up just over here. This looks like a good place to me to shut it down, so we'll throttle back down a little bit. Set the brakes. Let's get back in the cockpit here And I'm actually going to set our brakes, hold them, and let's do a securing aircraft check here. All right, parking brake set. Avionics, let's move down here. Avionics come off. Mixture, pull to idle cutoff. That shuts off the aircraft. Once that's fully come off, we'll go down here and move our ignition to off. Lights come off. We actually leave the beacon on, just because we want that on next time we turn it on for safety. Master switch comes off, both sides of it. Fuel selector valve will switch over to left or right. And if we had a flight plan, we would close it. We're here. If you can call the Uber, I'll call the barbecue place, get us some seats. Thanks for flying today. Leave some comments down below. Any questions you might have, and any of the references you might have needed for this video are available for download at clayviation.com. Until next time, we'll fly again soon.